So we'll go ahead and get started with day 3. So I called this class List to Last because when I first got into the business, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard this, I was told that if I really wanted to last, I needed to list. And I really, I followed that advice. And, for the past 22 years, I still believe that that is seriously the way that if you want to stay in the business, that you have to do that. That doesn't mean that you don't work with buyers, but the better you get at getting listings, the more successful you will be, because if you can obviously see right now how it is with the buyer's market, or I'm sorry, the seller's market, and there's so many buyers out there and there's such a limited amount of inventory. You would want to be the listing agent right now if you were anything, because it's just, they're holding all the cards. So that's why I called this List to Last, and hopefully it will give you some good ideas, things that you can talk about with your clients, or if you're going on appointments. Even if you're not, if you're not talking to people right now that are ready to sell, I'm going to back up for a minute since you guys haven't been on the class before. I usually don't do this, but I think it's really important I'm going to go through these really quickly. So let me go back to my slides to the very beginning, to day 1. Because I think that it will be really helpful for you guys to kind of understand where I'm coming from. And you can always take the class again later. So I'm not going to go in detail with everything, but I do want to show you a few of the ideas that we came up with that I think are really important that you need to keep in mind when you're trying to get listings right now. If you're not really sure where to go, there are the number one thing that people kind of miss a lot when they're looking to find listings is they forget about the absentee owners. So basically it's a landlord. So it's kind of like a for sale by owner, but either people that have their properties that are renting them out. Maybe they've got their renters that are moving out. Or maybe you just know an area where there's a lot of properties that are the investment properties. So that's a really good source if you want to look into that. What I would say is pick one or two of these things on here and go after them. I wouldn't try to hit up everything just because I think that you'll get overwhelmed. But when it comes to that, working on relationships months before current renters leases expire, a lot of times you can find the landlords and you can get a hold of them and say, hey, I know that you've had this property for some time. I don't know if you're considering, if you thought about selling it, and, I'm sure you're aware that, values have gone up substantially. Have you considered selling the property? And if they say, well, we thought about it, but we've got renters in there and their leases don't come due until June or July. That's a good time to put that in your calendar a month or two before that happens so that you can contact them and follow up with them. And so those are the things that come down the road that you want to have in your pipeline. The second, of course, is for sale by owners. For sale by owners, they're easy leads. The one thing you know about them is they're trying to sell their house. They may not understand all of the specifics and how to do it, but you know that they're putting them on the market. And I know like KSL and some of those sites are good places to go to find those. You do have to go in and make sure that you're checking that it's a for sale by owner and it's not by realtor. And so, of course, sometimes agents will put their names on there at the very bottom. But another thing is, and like I said, I'm not going to go in detail because this was like an hour class when I did this, but I just want to give you guys some ideas. Divorces and selling homes. Get with some attorneys and talk to them and find out if there's a chance that you could maybe team up with them. And when they are dealing with a divorce situation, if they'd be willing to refer you to their clients to sell the home. That's a good source to work with. Expireds and withdrawn. The nice thing about expireds and withdrawn right now, you don't have as many because most of them are selling pretty quickly unless they just withdrew for some other reason. But if they're expired on the MLS, then they were obviously before they listed the home, they listed it with an agent. So that wasn't really the issue. It wasn't the issue that they didn't want to pay a commission. So sometimes those are a good place to go back. And I've been told just recently on a few of the trainings that I've been in that going back 6 months, 7 months, maybe even a year to see what had expired on the MLS go back to those people. They may not have sold yet. And if they haven't sold, they probably don't even realize that how much equity they have in their home beside, you know, compared to what they did a year ago. So it doesn't necessarily have to be just the ones that are popping up in the next, you know, 30 days or back 15 days. They get hammered with agents. And so your competition is much greater. So you may want to go back on the MLS, and you can do that by putting in, oh, sorry, I've got to add somebody here. You can go in and add in way back, maybe it's a year or whatever. But that's another good way to put something in your pipeline for future. So I'm kind of just going through these very quickly. Downsizing from big to smaller. If you find older areas of neighborhoods where people originally, like the one I live in right now, most of the people that live in my neighborhood built the houses in the 70s, and they live in there, and they're all starting to want to downsize or you know, move to smaller homes or go into even assisted living and things like that. So that's a good source. And again, another one would be transitioning from a home to an assisted living. If you get in with somebody with an assisted living that is a manager that talks with people as they come in, that's a great source. If you can build a relationship with them, to have them hand out your business cards or talk to people about you when they're coming in. People are coming in and wanting to get into an assisted living, but they're not quite sure how to go about it. You know, they can offer your services and have them call you. Another thing is probate. A lot of people inherit properties that they don't want. And a lot of times, you know, somebody passes away in the family and they leave it to the kids, and the kids just want to get it sold. So you know what, hit up a probate attorney and see if there's somebody that you can get in with. There's several out there. So, you know, you may go to 10 of them and only maybe have one that might act like they might refer, but you know, it's like anything, you don't even know until you try. And so again, I would pick one or two of these things. Foreclosures, I just talked about that a little bit. Foreclosures will probably be on the rise, and they expect it'll probably be happening by the time people, they did a forbearance. A lot of people did forbearance during the COVID. And they, like I said, they ended up letting them go for, you know, 90 days or 120 days, whatever it was they agreed to, where they didn't charge them any late charges. They didn't report it on their credit as a late. However, when that comes due, it all comes due at once. And so the problem is going to be, you're going to have people that are going to, all of a sudden that 90-day mark creeps up on them so quickly that they didn't even realize it was going to happen that fast. And then by the time that happens, and then they find out they have to pay all of the back payments, people are really going to be, you know, stressing out, especially if they're unemployed. If they've lost jobs, that's going to be an issue. So then, you know, if that happens, say by January 1st, which is what we expect to happen, then they go through the process of, you know, foreclosure, where, you know, they have to file notice of default and all those kind of things. So it could be, you know, March, April, May before we start seeing, you know, foreclosures. We would really like to step in and help people long before that happens. And the only way to do that is to get with your title companies and get a notice of default, or start sending out letters to areas. If you know a certain area, you know certain people, you know, that are in default, you know, you don't want to walk up to their door, obviously, and be like, hey, I know that you're behind on your payments, but you know what, we want to be able to help them. So now's the time to put together brochures and pamphlets on ways that you can help. So, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot more of that. Recently sold homes in the neighborhood. So like I said, this was just what I had went over in the first class that I did. And so since we're on day 3, I'm going to skip on through here. We had pulled up a for sale by owner in our day 2 class. I showed you where to find the information, and to go on, you know, either go on the website for the counties, or you could go to your title companies, wherever you could, you know, on the MLS. That is what we had in day 2. And then we did some comparables and pulled up some comps. So based off the comps that we had, I'm going to skip I'm gonna skip this video because it's just kind of a funny video. It's kind of got a little bit of raw humor in it. So if we get time at the end and we want to watch it, we will. But I like to keep my trainings down to an hour and try not to go over that time. So I usually will play this in the beginning while we're waiting for people to sign on. But it's kind of funny. If you want to take down that YouTube thing right here, you can. But it's kind of cute. It talks about listings and what sellers' expectations are. So we all know that property value, there's a lot of things that go to consideration for that. It's location and, you know, what the market's doing, the age of the home, the condition, improvements, neighborhood, all of those kind of things. So when we did the CMA in our class number 2, this is basically what we came up with as far as the comparables when we put it in, comparing it to other properties in the area. So the current CMA on it came in at $345,993. Of course, there's always additional considerations that the appraiser is going to add in or possibly take away, I guess. But most of the time they're going to add in. And I just listed a few things. This isn't everything. You know, if there's upgrades in the home, if there's, you know, a second kitchen, maybe a mother-in-law apartment that's in there. Granite flooring, things like that, fencing, upgraded appliances. Maybe it has just fantastic landscaping that's a lot different and a lot more upgraded than what some of the other comps would be. Outbuildings, RV parking, upgraded wiring and systems and things like that, pools and hot tubs. You know, we know that they don't give a whole lot for pools and hot tubs, but they do give some consideration for that. Gated communities, depending on what they have, their HOAs, amenities that they may have in there, that can all affect the pricing of the home when we're doing a market analysis. So, you know, right now we all know that, you know, if this house comes in at $345,993 right now, and it's in somewhat decent shape, you know, we already know that things are going up, could go up $30,000 by the time you get offers on it and everything. But I think it's really important to make sure that when you're coming up with market analysis, you have to understand everything that's involved. So when you're explaining it to a seller and you're trying to work on getting a listing, being prepared ahead of time is going to make a huge difference. And that's why I put this together. Some of you probably already know this stuff. You probably already do it. If you do, that's great. Just kind of a refresher. But some of you don't. And some people that, you know, a lot of people that maybe do this part-time, work full-time jobs, do it on the side, and you haven't had a listing for a while. I just want this to be a great, you know, refresher for you so that you can get prepared and get ready for when you do get that next listing. So when we're explaining these things, of course, when we're talking about dollars, we got to talk about the value of the home. And then we're explaining to people, you know, of course, they always want top dollar, of course. However, they don't think about all the costs that are involved. And so, you know, they have to minus out the amount that they owe on their mortgage. And that's what equals their equity. However, we all know that their equity that comes off of that bottom line isn't what they end up walking away with, because there's a lot of fees and things involved. So one of the things that I think gets missed sometimes, and there's not a lot of these loans, but you know, if you're dealing with somebody that had a mortgage, you know, 20 years ago, they've been paying on the home for 20, 25 years, they still have a mortgage on it for 30 years or something, they may have a prepayment penalty depending on the type of loan they got. So make sure that when you're talking with people, you're asking those questions, because they're not going to think of these things. You're going to have to. So, you know, what is a prepayment penalty? Basically, you know, somebody took out a loan on a home with ABC Bank, and he paid it before it was due. The due date came up. It was a 30-year loan. He paid it in 20 years. And in the contract, it stated that there was a prepayment penalty. So if that's the situation, of course, you want to talk to your sellers and you want to tell them, you know, this is what you need to do. You know, the banking lending institution that currently owns your mortgage may have that pre-penalty. You should speak to your lender now, ask if they can plan on assessing your prepayment penalty, figure how much that is, and then see if they can negotiate that so that they can, you know, either that or waive some of that, all of the payment. And then, of course, they always usually want to make sure that they submit a formal prepayment notice to the lender. So again, these are things that I don't think a lot of agents take into account when they go out and list a home. They kind of look at it and say, well, you know, if the house is worth this, they only owe this much on there. We, you know, 4 or 5, you know, they can pay. Sorry, I gotta let somebody in here. You know, they can, you know, they'll pay a brokerage fee. There'll be a little bit, maybe a closing cost for the buyer, whatever. The one thing you don't want to do is take a guess at that and not ask those questions, because I have seen way too many times when agents don't ask those questions and don't ever do a net sheet breakdown for the seller, and they get to closing and find out that seller doesn't even have enough equity in their home to pay for everything that was agreed to. In my opinion, that is the agent's fault. If they do not educate their sellers well enough, that's what they pay you for. Is, you know, sometimes, yes, they don't tell you everything, but they aren't going to tell you unless you ask. So you have to know the questions to ask. So be really careful. Make sure that you're asking those kind of things. So when we're talking to them, of course, there's always going to be pre-sale preparations that we want to talk to them about. And we all know, you know, that there's things that they need to go through. Hopefully you're going through the home with them and making notes of things that you can see that might be an issue, and giving them a checklist. And all of us with iPro, we have a, you know, a declutter checklist. We have pre-listing checklists. We have all kinds of things in our library. So there's no reason to not hand out those kind of things to the sellers. Those are what we call, you know, something of value. And so if you can give that to even for sale by owners, whoever you might be happen to work with that might be listing in the future or thinking about selling in the future, those are things that are already put together for you. So if you're kind of struggling right now and you're going, I just don't even know what to send out. I don't know what to say to people. I don't know who to go to. I don't know how to get these listings. First of all, the first thing you got to do, and I know this sounds kind of, you know, maybe blunt, but the first thing you have to do is do something, right? We have to move forward. We have to decide what it is we're going to work on, and we have to do it. And it's really hard to do that, especially sometimes when you get in a funk like we feel like right now with the way that the market's been going. You know, we're just, everything's kind of unsure. We've got an election going on, and we just have all kinds of things happening in the world, and it's crazy right now. But we know this for a fact. Real estate has not slowed down in Utah. We know that, you know, the market is just still going crazy. So if there's buyers out there and our numbers are as high as they are right now, just within our company, not even to mention what they are across the boards, across the state. But if we have that many people buying homes and we have that, our numbers are that high, that tells you that the market's strong. And so if you've got buyers out there, they're buying homes, there's homes out there, which means people are selling. So sometimes we have to get creative and we have to decide, okay, what do we want to go after? What areas do we want to do that's different than what everyone else is doing, other than calling the for sale by owner signs and calling the expired listings and all those kind of things. So all the things that we just talked about in the very beginning of this class, you know, they're really important to make sure that you're finding a niche somewhere that fits for you, because it is uncomfortable. It's hard to have people, you know, reject you. But you know what? That's part of the business, and that's okay. It's nothing personal. So if you happen to be driving by and you see a home, for instance, that's maybe a little bit run down, maybe they got a for sale by owner sign in the yard, and you can tell, you know what, maybe these people are struggling. I mean, you hate to always make assumptions or judge, but you know, you're going to assume that, you know, they're putting it up for sale by owner. First of all, they're probably trying to save fees. Second of all, you know, maybe there's repairs and things that they haven't thought about that are going to have to be done when they sell the home. Maybe they're not asking enough for the home when they decide to put it on the market. So all of these things that I'm going over with you can be really great marketing tools that you can look into and give to them as something of value. And walking through and just giving them a checklist of things that they need to maybe work on to fix up is huge. Smoke detectors, vents, you know, all kinds of things that can be done. Right now, we just had daylight savings time change. Now's a great time to remind people, you know, about, you know, change your clocks, change your batteries. I mean, you know, you hear that twice a year in the spring and in the fall. Always good information that you can give to them. One of the things that we have in our library that I just mentioned was the what to declutter. This is a checklist that you can pull up under Impressions Home Preparation System. this has great information, and yeah, they won't use it all. And if you don't want to have this whole thing and you want to take some of it and make up your own and kind of, you know, make it smaller, do whatever you need to do to make it your own. We do have a lot of pages in the library as well that you can actually design and make it your own and put your name and your picture and all that stuff on there too. So anyway, so the next thing that we talk about then is closing costs. So if you don't understand the closing costs that are involved with the seller side, not just the buyer side, you know, you need to really make sure that you're getting that refresher course to say, okay, you know what, we got closing costs. What are they? I'm going to use you guys as my guinea pigs today, because I put together a poll. I learned about this the other day in a class I took, and I want to see if it works. So I'm going to put a poll on here. I only have one because I just wanted to test it, but just out of curiosity, I'm going to launch this poll. You guys can just go on. And the question is, what is the average seller's closing cost for title fees? So as you go on there, you should be able to submit your answer. It's 1%, 2%, or 3% of the purchase price. Go ahead and choose which one you think that it is. Hey, this is kind of cool. I watched it done in the class the other day, but I haven't done it before, so this is awesome. Let's see, I got somebody in chat room, so let's go up here and see what we got here. Perfect. Vaughn, did you go on there and vote? Oh, you're gonna have to unmute. Might not be able to. Okay, anyway, so you can see on here, so Vaughn's answer, I don't know, I guess you want me to say this, you put it in the chat room so everybody can see it, but Vaughn said that, oh, sorry, I'm gonna pull up this chat really quick. Your mic is broken, oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, so Vaughn put 1% in the chat room, and then it looks like the rest of you've got 67% at 2% and 33 at 3%. The actual realistic number that you could go off of if you were just trying to come up with, okay, what are the fees at title for a property, is typically about 1% of the purchase price. Now, if you're going to include, if you was going to go in and include like brokerage fees and, home warranties, all that kind of stuff, then yes, it would be a higher number. Of course, obviously, then it would be a lot higher number because brokerage fees can range between 3 to 6% or 7%. But typically, if you were out and somebody asked you that question and said, what do you mean I have to pay closing fees? I thought that the buyer can pay their own fees. Okay, so just so you understand, most of you probably know this, but I'm just going to tell you anyway. Your closing costs at title are going to be, that is the seller's closing costs. So the seller has closing costs. They have to purchase title insurance for the new buyer. They have to pay for, all the recording fees and, all of those kind of things. So all of that adds up to be right around about 1%, usually a little bit less than 1%. It just depends. It depends on how many mortgages they've got to pay off and things like that. So it does make a difference what all's involved, but it's typically 1% is what they can plan on. And so when you're talking with sellers, if they're asking about the closing costs and they're asking about, what are my fees involved, you would be really safe to say, if you're going to list it for say 6%, and that's what your fees are, you would say, approximately 7% if you include the extra 1%. Okay, so the buyer's costs, seller's closing costs. Of course, it depends on how you look at this. And I know, buyers, of course, we know they have lender's fees, escrow charges, they have title and closing fees. But on the seller side here, you can see it says real estate commissions, repair costs, possibly. That's another thing. So if you're talking with the sellers and they say, you never want to give them an exact number, of course, because you don't want to say, well, it cost you 7%, approximately 7%. because there's a lot of extra things that might not be included. And one of those could be repair costs. If you see a lot of repairs that need to be done to the home, that could be something that could cost them money or it could bring that pricing down. So the title and closing fees, of course, depending on the city or the state that you live in, that can differ. But they both have an iPro. Yes, they do, of the 150. You're right. So it really does depend, and that's why, you know, some companies charge like a $495 compliance fee, I guess is what you'd call it. They call it transaction fee or something, but admin fees. So it really does depend on the company. But all in all, I think that, you know, 1% is pretty fair amount to go off of depending on the home. That would probably take into account some of those extra costs that we charge them. Miscellaneous fees, of course, there's wire fees, home warranties, and buyer's closing costs if applicable, prorated HOA dues, property taxes, all of those kind of things. So, you know, you don't have to know every single detail about how it's broke down, but the reason I brought it up is I want you to kind of have somewhat of an idea of what it's going to cost them. So if you get asked that question, you're not just completely puzzled by what they're asking you. Okay, so this one is what is an account or an escrow account. Anybody want to speak out and let me know what they feel escrow account? What is considered into a escrow account as far as a mortgage, if you had a mortgage? Anybody want to take a shot at it? You have to unmute yourself too if you need to, if you want to talk. No one? Oh, hold on a minute. We got a chat going on. Taxes and insurance. Yep, exactly, Vaughn. So the taxes and insurance, there's homeowners insurance, there's property taxes, and a lot of times there could be a PMI, mortgage insurance that they hold in escrow. Typically, they don't usually get much of a refund back on a mortgage insurance. It just all depends on how long they've been in the home, when it was they put it in there, how much was, you know, placed in the account, things like that. But just for, just to keep it simple, if you're talking to your sellers about their escrow, the reason I bring that up is because when we get to the net sheet, I will show you on here that part of what they get charged will be the taxes for the time that they're in the home. And that will get credited to the buyer, but collected from the seller. So those property taxes and possibly their insurance, since it will be taken from them out of their proceeds at closing, they will get a credit back. They'll get a check probably back from their mortgage company, depending on when they close. So seller's net sheet then, who just by either raise a hand, you guys can do yes, no. I think there's options on here. You can do thumbs up if you don't want to talk or whatever. But just by raise of hand or whoever wants to talk, who does a net sheet for their sellers? Anybody? Sometimes, yeah. Anybody else? Sorry, I'm trying to see everybody on here, but I can't see everybody because it takes up my screen. Let's see here, we got some chat. Okay, so Diane says that she's never been asked for one. So let me tell you, this is my personal feeling about a net sheet. So when I first got in the business, I was lucky enough that I had a broker that sat me down and said, this is a net sheet and you will use this. And so I never had a choice. I always used it. And so Vaughn says verbally always do it with an approximate numbers. And at least you're going over, at least you guys know what that is. I mean, you know, knowing what it is a huge thing. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong or whatever, but I will tell you this. When you're working with a seller, I feel like it is your obligation to find out where they're going to sit when it comes to the bottom line. And I feel like every time I've ever went on a listing appointment, I am like one of the few, if not the only agent that sits down and does a net sheet. for the seller. And a lot of times in the past when I was really, working real estate, I usually ended up getting the listing mostly off of that alone. It's nothing fancy. It doesn't have to be all fancy and everything. And I know that some of the agents say, well, I get a hold of the title company and they'll give me a breakdown. I can go into one of their apps and I can get that information. And that's great. If you can do that, that's great. The only thing I am concerned about when you do that is they don't have all the little extra things in there that maybe the seller needs to consider when you're talking with them. So I am more than happy to give anybody that wants a copy of this net sheet. You don't have to be an Excel spreadsheet guru to know how to use it. It's actually pretty simple, and I'm going to show you how to use it here in a minute. This is one that I just put together just to show you an idea of what's on there. So typically what I'll do is at the very top of here, I will, yeah, Diane, for sure. You know what, I will, if you guys want copies of any of these, if you'll just email me, I would appreciate it, because once these are gone off of here, I have a hard time going back and finding out who wanted things. So if you'll just shoot me a quick email and just say, please send me a net sheet. Matter of fact, maybe what I could do is Bruce is on here. Bruce, maybe we could put together a template and put it in the iPro library. I think that would be a great idea, because I don't believe that's something that we have. I know that people have said before, oh, I don't want to do that if I give out those numbers and they're not right. Okay, so first of all, I have at the very bottom of the form that says these are estimates provided to the seller based off of the information given by the seller. Okay, so, and I have them sign it. And it's an estimate. It is not an exact number. I'm a conservative, so when I go in and do these, I like to figure high and come out at the end with them having extra money in their pocket. So for instance, if you look at this, you can see that if I got my sales price at $325,000, title insurance on here, I'll show you the formula that I have, and it works almost every single time. I'm almost right to the penny. Usually I overfigure. These are just a few of the things, and they're not exact, and there could be more things that could be charged at title, but for the last 23 years that I've done this, I've used this sheet and I've adjusted it based on any changes that happen with title companies that I can see charges changing. But for the most part, the title insurance, there's, closing agent fees, document prep fees, reconveyance fees, FedEx, wire fees, things like that. That's kind of just a lumping it all together. So I may have escrow closing agent fee of 200 and it may only be 120, but the extra 80 bucks that I have in there can adjust for somewhere else. Maybe they've got two loans that have to be paid off. So they're going to charge them a wire fee on both of those, or recording fees, whatever it happens to be. So you can see in the yellow, I've got these are all the title company fees that they're going to pay at escrow. Of course, you got mortgage balance, and that's something that, you can ask them if they're uncomfortable with that. You can say, listen, I'm going to leave it blank, and then you fill in the blank. You can put in there whatever it is that you want. Some people, if you don't know them well enough, or you're just trying to provide information, and you don't want to ask that, that's fine. Just tell them, make sure and subtract that out of there. The one thing I will tell you about mortgage balance, though, is that you need to make sure you're asking the question, do you have a first mortgage? Do you have a line of credit against the home, or second mortgage? They have all kinds of names for them, but basically, is there any loans that you owe, that you pay for, that are against this home? Because a lot of times people think that if they have a second mortgage or they have a line of credit, that they don't have to pay off that line of credit. That's something they can just keep. And that's not true. It has to be paid off. So typically, if somebody was to say to me, you know what, I owe $250,000. I got my statement and it says I owe $249,000. I always add on an extra $1,000 for interest. It could be more than that, but because interest is in arrears, so the interest they're paying when they pay it off is for the month prior to. So if you always figure about an extra $1,000 on there, $1,500 on there, explain to them what that is, then again, you're kind of being conservative and putting those numbers a little bit higher. So things can change. The compliance fee, or I'm sorry, the brokerage fees, I'll show you on the next sheet when I do this, that my brokerage fees are set up and you can change them. So if mine's set up, I believe on here at 6%. If for some reason you decided you're going to reduce your commission or something's changed or whatever, you can always adjust that based on, the numbers. The compliance fee, of course, I always put it on there no matter what. And I will tell you this, the one thing I love about this net sheet is when you're talking to people before you've listed their property, you're already giving them all their numbers up front. They're already aware what the brokerage fees are going to be. And notice I called that a brokerage fee. It's not, I don't call it commissions because commissions sound like they're negotiable. The brokerage fee is there. The compliance fee is already on there. If you're going to give up something, if somebody asks you to reduce something, you're better off to say, we have to collect a compliance fee and this is what it's for. However, I will go ahead and I will let my company know that I will go ahead and pay that $150 for you so that you don't have to pay it. So you can count that out. It's better to give up $150 than it is 1% of your commission. I mean, the math there, you can see that it's a huge difference. But if you got to give up something, give that up. Give that up and pay for a home warranty if that helps. Just because it's still cheaper than 1% of what the commission is going to be. Thank you, Vaughn. Vaughn says it's a great point calling it a brokerage fee and not commission. Yeah, I had an agent one time argue with me and say, you can't call it that. And I said, why can't I? And they said, because that's not what it is. And I said, you better look at your contracts because your contracts states in there that it is a brokerage fee. It's what we're collecting. So yes, it is. Commission sounds like it is something that's negotiable, and brokerage fee is something that you say, this is the brokerage fee that is set, that the company sets with where I work. People get really hung up on that and they talk too much about brokerage fee, in my opinion. Most of the time, if you're going through this, people will not question you. If you go through and, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I just want to go over these costs with you that are involved with the sale of your home. Everything here in the yellow highlighted area is the cost that you will have as your seller's closing costs, just like buyer will have closing costs to get their loan. But this is something that you will have. You have to pay this. I highlighted it in yellow because that is all of the title company fees that you'll be having on there. The mortgage balance, of course, will be your balance here. Of course, when you decide to list the home, the brokerage fee would be this, the compliance fee, and this is what the compliance fee is. Hopefully you guys know how to explain that. Compliance fee is $150. That's to retain the records so that we can keep them, legally we have to keep them for X amount of years, all those things. If you go through it just like that and jump down to prorated taxes and start talking about the taxes that they're going to pay, how much their taxes are based off of what you found on the county record, you take that, you divide it by 12 months and then times it by the months that they're in the home. You can actually click over here and I'll show you in a minute that we can take the prorated taxes and it'll automatically calculate it for you. If you jump down to there and then tell them that, yes, I know that your taxes are in an escrow, just so you know, they will take this from you at closing out of your proceeds and they will credit it to the buyer, and the buyer will be responsible for the full year. So in return, you can expect that $1,621 that's being taken from you, you're actually going to get that back from your mortgage company. So there's $1,600 that you can count back in. So what you do is you take it from here that are the absolute have to in the yellow down to the mortgage balance that has to be paid. These are your fees. These are brokerage, and you jump down to the tax, and the tax you're telling them they're going to get it back. And most of the time, they don't even question that. There's so much information you're giving them that sometimes they're just like, ugh. If they're going to question you on brokerage fee, they'll come back and question it. If they stop you right there in your tracks, you can review and go over with them and tell them how that works. What I don't like to do is on this brokerage fee, that's not where I like to explain to them at that time how it's divided up between a buyer's agent and you. That's something you can talk about after the fact, and that's something you can talk about on the listing agreement because it's broke down on the listing agreement, and that's where you can show them exactly how it's broke down. But if you need to, you can do that. I always, when I'm listing a home, it's a little bit different now with it being such a big seller's market and buyers are just battling just to get their offers accepted. However, I still put in there that typical buyers in this price range are going to ask for closing costs to be paid. What that means is they're going to borrow the money. So they're going to borrow it in their loan instead of come up with it in cash. So a lot of sellers will say, well, I'm not paying for their closing costs. And so what we need to know how to explain is you're not paying for that, because most of the time they're going to raise the purchase price to cover that. They're going to make your offer and they're going to put it in there, and you can always come back and counter it. However, I want you to be prepared that typical buyers' closing costs and concessions are around 3%. You could change it to 2, you can change it, you can take it off if you don't like it on there. A home warranty is typical, and that's about $500. Since your home is built in 1970s, it gives the buyer, a good fuzzy warm feeling to know that when they move in, that they've got a home warranty for 1 year. You pay the $500 at closing, and then after that, they're responsible. They have to pay any, deductibles or anything that has to be paid, service calls, it's all up to them. But that way they feel better about if maybe the heater, your furnace is older, and instead of you having to pay and put a new furnace in, and it costs you a couple $1,000s, do the home warranty, and that will cover most of the components in the home. So when you break it down, you can see you got purchase price minus the, all of the fees involved. So that would be your total expenditures. And then the cash in hand would be the $290,000. In this case, of course, we don't have the mortgage balance on here. So that would have to be subtracted out if they have a mortgage. Any questions on that before I go to the next page and show you the Excel spreadsheet? Okay, good. Hopefully this is good information. I know it's a lot, and I'm hoping this is gonna work because I'm on a different deal here. I might have to go back out. I'm going to, I'm gonna actually close this for a second. I want to bring up the Excel spreadsheet because I think it's really important for you guys to see how this works. Okay, are you able to see that Excel spreadsheet? Yeah, okay, cool. All right, so for instance on this, this is what I had on there a minute ago that I showed you, but I want to show you that if I go into this purchase price and I say, based on the CMA that we did on this house, it came in around, I think it was 345 something, we're going to say 360, because with the market the way it is, people are paying extra for the houses, whatever. Maybe we had upgrades in the house that weren't accounted for. On the title insurance, you can see here now that the 360, that changes. I've got that in there at 0.7%. Okay, so 0.7%. So it's not 1%, but by the time you take these fees and everything, like I said, it's not really usually 1%. It's usually a little bit less. And the higher the price of the home, it doesn't get bigger and bigger with that. It usually stays about 1% still. It doesn't keep going higher. So if, for instance, you got with your title company and they said, oh no, on that house at 360, it's going to be, $2,800. You can actually go in and just change the number there. You don't have to use the calculation that's in it. These numbers here are all based off they're just standard numbers that are in there. They're not calculated off of any certain amount. But you can see on the mortgage balance, if I was to go in here and let's say that they owe $240,000 on, $240,000 on their home. Now I've got that in there and it's going to subtract it out when it comes down or add it into their expenditures and take it out of their cash in hand. Over here on the brokerage fee, like I was saying, see how on the brokerage fee on there, I just have brokerage fee. If I click on here, you can see that I've got it listed at 6% on there. What I recommend is if you're going to use something like this and you're going to reduce your commission for some reason or another, that's totally up to you and you have the right to do that. If you reduce that to 5%, change it here where the 6 is, replace that with a 5. But over here where it says the brokerage fee, I typically would type in there, I would write reduced to 5%, savings of, and I put how much that savings is. So savings of $1,200, $3,600, whatever it happens to be. Because when I'm going through that with them and I've already decided that before I went out there, then it's in there. and you kind of get to pat yourself on the back a little bit so that they're aware that you're reducing and that's how much money you're saving them, because then you look like a hero. The compliance fee, same thing with the 150. When you're in there and you say, you know what, I really can't reduce that because I've got to offer at least 3% out to the buyer's agent in order for them to show your home, or else the buyer will have to make for the difference. That's the typical fee that, we charge for our company. The compliance fee, if you decided you're not going to charge that, line through it for now, or change it to 0 if that's what you decide you're doing. Maybe you've talked about it before you go out to present this to them. The prorated taxes on this home are $1,946. So if you take the $1,946 and you divide it by 12 months times, let's say they're going to be in it for 10 months. You come over here, you click on that, you just change that number. So it's already set up. So like I said, if you're not a Excel guru, it's okay. You can just change it. Or if you say, you know what, I'm going to figure it up on my own and I'm going to type the number in there, just do that. Just remember, you have to change it for each presentation you do. Okay, so the buyer's concession, same thing. It's set up at 3%. So you can see B1 is the number up here. So 360 times 3% is what that number comes to, and a home warranty. So down here, you can see all costs listed above are approximate based on information collected by the seller. I haven't signed that. So the one thing I love about this net sheet, when you list the home, you have the net sheet set up. So it's already set up for you. So now when you list the home and you get an offer or 10 offers, whatever it happens to be, the one nice thing about this is at the top of here, what you don't see is I've got it. So it's there's an iPro logo on there and it says prepared for, and it has the seller's name, and prepared by, and it has my name, and it has the date on there. When we get back to a normal, hopefully some type of a normalcy of real estate market, we may have a best and worst case scenario. This is what we're going to hope for, is this high number, and worst case scenario, this low number. You could do 2. But what's really neat is when you get an offer on the home, you can do one of these based on every single offer, based on what the contract says. So if they go through and they change something, they don't have buyer concessions, you take it off. If they don't want a home warranty, take it off, put a 0. Then when you're sitting down with your seller, you can say, okay, we got 5 offers, and this is what every single offer is offering. Bottom line is what they care about, right? Then you sit back and you go, okay, now the difference between these, and sometimes you have to write it on there or you can type it on there. This one now has a home to sell. This one, has this or this. This is a cash offer. What's really nice is you have a way to explain it to them that they understand, which honestly is always just their cash in hand. That most of the time is all they care about. They expect you to do the negotiations for them, to get the dates and all of those kind of things in line. They don't care about that because that's your job. All they care about is when are we closing and what am I going to walk away with? And so it's a really nice tool to have. And in my opinion, it's the #1 tool to have when you are working with sellers. So does anyone have any questions, comments, anything they want to add, or does that help? Is it helpful? Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to see if I can see everybody else's faces. I only have a couple of you guys that are brave enough to show your faces on here. All right, let's see. Natalia says, yes, it is, and love it. This is helpful from Vaughn. Thank you. I appreciate it. Diane says same thing, very helpful. I've had a company come to me that wants me to do some videos and do some training and charge people and stuff. And I honestly, my biggest thing about this is I don't do this all professional with the whole background and the lighting and all those kind of things. But I'll tell you, the one thing that I care about the most is that you guys get something from the class. You may know a lot of the stuff that's already on here, and that's great. But hopefully this stuff really makes a difference and helps you out. There's also a link that if you're not sure what to put in for your numbers or whatever, you can go to most of the title companies have a link that you can get their calculator that you can actually put that in there. Vaughn says he uses an Excel spreadsheet for multiple offers so they can see everything on one sheet. Just use the bottom lines. Yeah, that's perfect. Because honestly, once you went through that first sheet with them, when you first listed and stuff, they don't care about all the other stuff in between. You're right. They want that bottom line. And if we're not missing anything, great. Then, you know, that's the way to do it. So yeah, good on you. I think that's awesome that you do that. It's so important. So, but like, for instance, this is Stewart Title. They have, oh, I gotta accept this. I just happened to pull this one up. They have the seller's net sheet that if you don't want to do the one I just showed you, but you want to go on here, there's buyer's closing sheet, title and escrow, there's seller's net sheet. You can go through and choose the property location, the closing date, transaction type, sales price, all those kind of things. So when you're on here, you can actually add in, you know, quite a few things. It just doesn't break it down the same as what I like it. So, you know, if you're not using anything else, that's fine. Just use that then. Okay, so capital gains really quickly. Capital gains, of course, if you're not familiar with that, basically capital gains will be charged to somebody if they haven't lived in the home at least 2 years out of the past 5 as their primary residence. They could have capital gains. If they're a married couple, then it's $500,000. And honestly, I don't think that's necessarily true anymore with the married couple thing. I think it's joint tenants. That's something that we need to probably check on. I don't know. I'm not an accountant. All I know is that $250,000 for individual or $500,000 for a married couple is what it says. So if you're talking to people and they've been in a home for a long time, and let's say they bought their house 25 years ago and they paid, oh gosh, what would be a realistic number? 100,000, 45,000, something like that. And now they're selling it and there's, you know, $300,000, $400,000 gain on that. Of course, if it's a married couple, there's no capital gains. If they are a single person and there's an extra, you know, it's 400,000. So they've got, I'm just gonna make it easy. They paid 100,000, they're selling it for 400,000. That doesn't mean that just because they're selling it for that much more that they have to pay capital gains. They'd have to get with their accountant, obviously, but they can go in and claim all of the improvements that they've done to the home is added on costs to that. They can, anything that cost them to when they bought the home, anything it's going to cost them to sell the home, brokerage fees, all those kind of things are included in that. So it's not as simple as it sounds. And so if people are getting a little bit worried about that capital gains, definitely send them to a CPA to have them explain it to them. The biggest deal is they have to have been living in the home in the past 5 years. 2 out of the last 5 years had to be their primary residence. That's the big thing. So if they bought it and then they've rented it out for the past 10 years, they're going to have some capital gains because it's considered an investment property. Again, we don't want to give them too much of that information because that's not our scope of practice. But so that is what I have for today. Do you guys have any questions for me that I can answer, or even anything else? I mean, it doesn't have to be about the class. If you guys have any questions, anything I can help you with today. Anybody need to scream because they're going nuts? They're tired of listening to the politicians on the news. I'm going to be glad for that to be over with. I got up this morning to have my coffee and was watching the news, and it went on and the sound came on for about 3 seconds and went off, and I couldn't get it to work after. And I thought, you know what, that's probably a blessing in disguise because all that they had was ads on there bashing on each other. So anyway, any questions? Yes, no, maybe yes. If you do, if there's anything you want to ask me about, if you want any of the information that I had on here, just email me. Or if you don't know my email, get a hold of Georgia and say, hey, Georgia, can you send me Cindy's email or whatever. But my name is spelled backwards, so it's hard to find me, but it's Cindy, CYNDI @iprorealty.net. So let's see, I've got a chat here. Oh, thank you. You guys are welcome. You love my classes. Oh, Diane, you're so nice. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, well, great. Well, good luck, you guys. Stay safe. And hopefully, you know, we have an answer one way or the other of who's winning tonight and it doesn't drag on for another week. I don't know how they get an answer tonight. There's too many people that are voting last minute, I think. So who knows? But anyway, I will let you guys go then. And I appreciate you being here. And we'll have another class next Tuesday. And that will be class number 4. And then these ones will go into the iPro library. If there's anything that you missed or you want to go back over, they will be in there as well. So, okay. All right. Thanks, you guys. Have a good day.